Hey humans, how's it going? Susan Ruth here. Thanks for listening to another episode of Hey Human Podcast. This is episode 430 and my guest is Huáscar Robles. Huáscar was born in Puerto Rico and now lives in Los Angeles. He's an author, a journalist, a lecturer, and a human rights advocate. We met at a play here in LA, and I immediately knew he was a special human. He radiates hope and kindness, and it's clear to me that he's spending his time on Earth making it better and more connected, and I think you will find that to be true as well when you hear this episode. Hey Human Podcast is now on YouTube under official Susan Ruth. I'm on Patreon at Susan Ruthism, TikTok, Susan Ruthism. Check out heyhumanpodcast.com for links and to learn more about my guests and the show. Check out susanruth.com to learn more about me and my other artistic endeavors. And you can follow the path of my short film, The First. And please follow Susan Ruthism on social media. Find my albums on Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music, wherever you get your music. Rate, review, and subscribe to Hey Human Podcast on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks for listening. Be well, be kind, be love, and here we go. Huáscar Robles, welcome to Hey Human.
It is such a pleasure to be here.
It's lovely to see you.
I agree. I've been looking forward to this for last 2 weeks.
Yay! Well, welcome. You and I met at a brilliant play. We were sitting next to each other in the theater and got to chatting. And I was so happy that you agreed to be on the show. You are an incredibly interesting human being, and I'm excited to dig in.
Absolutely. Let's dig in.
Where are you from? Where did you grow up?
So I am from Puerto Rico. I was born in Santiago de Compostela in Spain because my parents are Puerto Rican, but my dad was studying medicine in Spain, and back in the 70s, it was cheaper to send your, doctor aspiring son abroad than paying with dollars in an American school. So my parents are there. I am from a little town called Caguas in Puerto Rico. That's where I grew up. It's in a valley. Actually reminds me a lot of LA. The geography there reminds me of home. Yeah, my mom's a teacher. My dad was a doctor, first doctor, both from very humble beginnings. So they wanted to equip us with the tools to succeed. And a lot of it was just studying and reading and writing.
How many siblings do you have?
4 siblings.
Oh, so it's a pretty big family, really.
Well, spread apart by different marriages. But
okay, got it. Yeah.
But I have from the same parents, my sister, who's lovely, and my brother, and I get along with them very, very well. My sister's an architect, and my brother is a very famous Instagram photographer, Omar Z. Robles. He's another interesting character in the family. And so is my sister, who's like an amazing architect and designer there. I'm very lucky to have come from a family of very artistic inclinations, even though our parents were not exactly happy about our artistic inclinations at the beginning, but it all came through.
I love architecture. I think that's quite the noble profession. I mean, writing, it's all noble. Photography is noble. Tell me about, as a kid, as you're growing up, and you're reading all the time, education is super important in your family. When did you realize that you had a gift for storytelling or for capturing what you were seeing around you?
So in Puerto Rico, especially in the countryside, this is how you get information to your family. You tell stories. It's all very anecdotal. So it's really beautiful because to tell you a lesson about what to do or what not to do, how to be a good human being in the world, is through a story. So you grow up seeing anything through allegories, through metaphors, through poetry. My favorite stories with my dad telling me about horror stories, and that seeped into my work, because my work is a lot kind of into a little bit of horror and comedy. But my dad used to, we go to this beautiful beach in the south of Puerto Rico. It was my favorite place. It's called La Parguera. And at dawn, it gets really, really golden. And my dad would start talking about El Diablo, which was this creature that came out of a cave to scare little kids at night. And I get that that's my dad wanted to just have some kid free time at that time. He just wanted to scare us to go to sleep. Being a real mythological figure of the Puerto Rican lore, so he used it as a way to scare us. But it was beautiful because for the rest of the night, you know, the kids from the beach and my siblings and I would just talk about this monster all night. And I don't know, eventually that became something that guided me, telling stories and telling stories through telling stories. Like that's I love narration within narration. Yeah.
What do you mean by that?
So sometimes when you start a story and then there's a story within the story, and then you kind of unravel out of that one to come back to original story, that's to me it's a very difficult but beautiful way of talking about something. And again, you know, in a country where, like they say, people, and I say this in Spanish, le gusta comer cuentos, they like to eat stories. It's an aphorism for people love to tell stories because sometimes you eat that instead of the truth or instead of reality. So yeah, that's part of the whole writing DNA.
How much did religion play a part in your childhood?
It did a lot. So interestingly, my parents, who were very liberal and very hippie, at some point took a weird turn towards religion. And now, you know, as an adult, I can understand that that probably was a way to give us something maybe they didn't have growing up, maybe some stability. But they took a turn towards evangelicalism, and it was sort of liberal, but that's not. It's never really liberal. We went to a evangelical high school that also had a mega church. And you know the culture of the mega churches. I mean, like just Google it, just look at all these mega churches and the hype, the energy, the lights. I mean, the choir is big and everything's fantastic. And again, stories, right? I mean, big stories for all these fantastic things that we're seeing. And the idea from religion in Puerto Rico specifically, which is very well documented, is that if Puerto Ricans, this is what, you know, what the American churches try to do is just try to Americanize Puerto Ricans they would become, you know, more in the shape and image of what they thought an American should be. So we went to these religious spaces, whether it was church or the school. It was pretty traumatic because as a kid, you know, you should not be seeing like, you know, quote unquote exorcisms that are not real, but you know, that was normal for us on a Thursday at school to see like a kid being exorcised. I mean, when I look at back and I'm like, that was a challenging environment. The plus side is that eventually when we all sort of like exited that phase, my family in different stages, we all exited that phase, we realized that the only way to have a critical mind sometimes is to have gone through the trauma of something, right? To have seen it and to lived it. And as a gay man, it was difficult to be in a community that purports love and unity, but really disenfranchises, you know, a big chunk of its people just because of who they love and how they love. So it took me a very long time to sort of deprogram that part and love myself again. And again, it's weird. I'm so thankful that I went through that because I don't think I would love myself and be so happy with who I am right now if I hadn't gone through that.
Now I'm going to insult someone out there by saying sure. And I don't mean it as an insult, but I do think that there's a juxtaposition to and a polarization of science and religion. Obviously, there are people who are scientists who have a deep respect and understanding and belief in God. I'm not, or whatever religion they have. But with all that already going on, and then you come and say, I'm gay. How did your family deal with that? Because on the science side, lots of, you know, of living, breathing creatures are gay. So it's not a shocker. So how did that play out in your family?
Not great. You know, initially their urge to protect me based on the weird assumptions that they were being fed kind of came out. Like, are you sure? I don't think this is you. This is just a phase. It happened in a really scary way. I went through like sort of an attack by another person who broke into the house because I was gay.
Oh my God.
And that wasn't great, obviously, but
A family member or not a family member?
someone, let's just put it at that.
Okay.
This is how my family found out because, someone broke into the family trying to hurt me because I was gay. What happened immediately after that was that the family tried to understand, like an extended family, they tried to rally around me, they tried to understand what had happened. And eventually, what I learned or what I understood later in life is that I knew they were going to see me as a human, not just as a gay person. And today, I have to say that my parents are my biggest champions. My cousins and my uncles too. Even some of those who are still attending and believing that very extreme world, they have a really hard time understanding because what they think of a gay person, when they see me, they don't see that because I don't know, they've always stereotyped. Let's see how to rephrase this better. I think my family members, when they see me now, they have a hard time because they expected that they could say that they were right about homosexuality in some sort of way. And I sort of proved them that we're no different than anybody else. I mean, it's been an interesting journey.
I think it is much easier to have bigoted opinions about a particular person if you don't know anybody
right
like that person.
Yeah.
It's easy to have an opinion of what it means based on what everybody tells you it means, or maybe your church or whatever it is. And if you don't actually know anyone, then you're doing yourself a disservice, clearly, because people are just people.
People are just people. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I think that they knew that, or at least I'm hoping that they see that, especially because I've noticed now the new generation of Christians that are being sort of coming out, and there's a great book that came out by this writer Paola Ramos. It's called The Deserters. I haven't read it yet, but it's about the Latin right? And I see some of my people in my family who are choosing to be very, very like right-wing religious in Puerto Rico, which is bizarre. I'm hoping that at some point that reason illuminates them, because the place where they're going right now, it's very dangerous for all of us.
Yeah, when you're talking of sort of a Christian nationalism.
Yeah.
Right. In America, if you refer to Puerto Rico, there's really, people just don't know. I think for the most part, there is very little knowledge. There's little understanding of the connection of that is part of the Americas. And I'm assuming in Puerto Rico, there's a deep, as you were mentioning, an understanding of how America is part of, they're all connected. Can you talk to that a little bit as far as identity?
Absolutely. I'll give you a very brief background. Puerto Rico was sort of given to the United States after the Spanish-American War in 1898. So for a year, Puerto Ricans back then thought that we had independence, and then realized that, when the American troops came through Puerto Rico, realized that we were being invaded. And it was a very swift influence. Immediately, Puerto Rico and a lot of the Antilles were seen as a key to the area, right? As a key next to Cuba. In Puerto Rico particularly, because we were part of the U.S. and we became sort of a, what's the word? It's a colony really, but the word is I forget the word. But it's essentially a colony of the U.S. Because we can travel to the United States, what we call the circular migration. We can easily come and go without a visa, without anything. We use our American passport. And because of the influence through religions, through culture, there is an identity crisis. And I think this is very well documented, where some Puerto Ricans kind of believe that they're American, and we are part of America, but they derive sometimes their Puerto Rican origins. That's a very common factor that plays into our culture, because when we have elections that we're all going to have, in November, Puerto Rico is going to have their own elections. There is a party It's called the New Progressive Party, but there's nothing new or progressive about it. It's actually very radical. And some of their ideas is to annex Puerto Rico to the United States. No, I'm not going to say that every single member of that political party dislikes being Puerto Rican, but I could definitely say that there is a cultural desire to be part of the United States as a way to negate sometimes their roots. And again, not everybody, but many.
That's a self-loathing.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's really tough to watch. The other political party believes in independence, and then there's a political party that believes in status quo. And the interesting part is that none of this, it's up to Puerto Rico, but it's up to Congress. And every time that any member of Congress have tried to pass this, it hasn't even reached voting that I can recall. Even if Puerto Ricans were to decide that they wanted to be part of the US, the economic implications would be devastating for the US. And also, Puerto Rico would be a blue state for sure. So then, that dies at the beginning.
Mm-hmm. The stories within the stories. Yeah.
Yeah.
You were educated for your college in New York?
I started in Puerto Rico. Then I went to Florida back in the 90s. So then I lived in the States for a while between different places. And then I went back to New York and I did a master's in creative writing in New York in 2014. Yeah. And then I did my second education there. Yeah.
You've received awards for your writing and gotten grants and all of that. That's got to be the thing about creativity, right? Is to be creative, we have to not think about how the world will receive us. We have to do what we do, and with the knowledge that it now is a baby of the universe and it will find its person. But as a creative, it is a life of poverty for a lot of us. And in doing so, you have to go after these grants and try and find people that will help and, put food on the table for you based on this creations you're making.
Right.
How do you get out of your head when you're trying to be creative, you're trying to create beautiful art, but you've got to eat?
That is a great question. I try really hard to implement mindfulness when I write, like trying to be in the moment. And I try to think of a very simple method. Like I write for about 25 minutes, maybe half hour, and then I stop. And then I just do increments, like that. I can be in the moment because sometimes, yes, there was a period of my life that I was like living from fellowship to fellowship. And I was like, I don't know if I could sustain this. I need to know where my next paycheck is coming from. And, luckily I learned to have a full-time job and then balance that with writing. And I think that really taught me discipline. But when I have a lot of pressure, I really try to exercise mindfulness and just focus on what I have in front of me. And I think, again, I'm just kind of thankful because in this last maybe like 3 or 4 years, I have just become so comfortable in my own body and my own writing that I come to write or to music with the same curiosity that I did when I started, not pretend that I know anything. And I just go like, well, how can I retell this story? And I think when I get tangled in the joy of art, like, I'm not doing it for other people. Like, I think I just want to find a new way to do this. And I get excited about it, right? And I just keep reading about it. And I just get like that kind of like delicious feeling. I kind of forget about everything else. But, as we get older, we also have medical situations that we have to think about. And I've gone through that too, where I'm just like, oh my God, I need to pay for this procedure and I don't know how I'm going to do it. But I don't know. I've started to really believe that everything is going to fall into place. And Susan, it has. So I have no reason to believe that it won't. I might receive some good news about something soon. And if it is, if I do receive this award that I've applied for, It will be really special because this year my writing mentor, passed away. I was in Puerto Rico for a writing congress, and the day before I finished my lecture, he called me, but it wasn't him. It was somebody who was taking care of him who had found him. When he woke up, had passed, and very sad. I love him deeply. His name is Felix Jimenez. I was recently in Puerto Rico. We all did a really beautiful memorial because he was a very famous writer in Puerto Rico. So I would love to summon him and tell him, "Hey, guess what happened?"
Oh, he'll know.
He'll know. And it's one of those joys of going through life is that you can share this with people that you care about, even if they're not here.
Yeah, absolutely. Talk about being present to the moment.
Yeah.
And you're also a journalist.
I mean, I'm focusing more right now in my fiction writing, but for many years I was a journalist. I wrote a lot about Haiti. I was there after the earthquake. But before the earthquake, I wrote about the Haitian population in Puerto Rico. I thought that there's no information about them and they feel like they were ostracized. So I made it my point to go meet with them, and I did a documentary about them and became friends with the diaspora there. I participated in the Columbia University's Start Center's Akbar Fellowship, and they had the Akbar Society had sponsored a request for me to go to report from the border between Haiti and the Dominican Republic about environmental justice. But when that got approved, the earthquake happened. So then I traveled and I reported. But the best part was that I didn't want to contribute to this continuing narrative of Haiti as a poor country. I mean, Haiti was just a country like any other one. And I met this beautiful dance company called Ayiko Dance, and they invited me to travel the South with them. And I went to a second trip 3 months after the earthquake, and I traveled with them. And I was so glad to contribute to another perspective of that country, to the beautiful music, the beautiful sound, the art they create, and to use it as a way to talk about ethical journalism, right? I mean, sometimes when we don't, with the way that we use our camera and the way that we use our words can have really deep, meaningful impacts on a country. Stereotypical photos of poverty, what they do is that they have a really bad effect on the policy. Sometimes international organizations use in these countries. I mean, if you keep portraying this as a poverty nation, a lot of international organizations are going to go, some of them with in good faith, a lot of them with the intention to profit off of poverty. And that is also been documented. So I was very, very well aware of the fact that I didn't want to participate in that dynamic. I am hoping that my work contributed to building that version of Haiti that so many of us know. Then I worked in about Puerto Rico after Hurricane Maria. I had a podcast called Catatonia where I was trying to again present another version of Puerto Rico, another traumatic one, through stories of resilience of folks that were there. And with Puerto Rico, it's been tough. It's my island, it's my country. And when I see, I don't know, you probably saw what happened, after the hurricane with that, the tossing of the paper towels. I mean, it was just such a symbolic moment of how Puerto Rico has been treated. So I was trying to build a new narrative of how Puerto Rico is. So in the hopes that one day our economic relationship to the U.S. becomes a fair one. I mean, I can sit here and talk about a lot of things, but there's a lot of economic policies that are affecting the island, from the cabotage law that makes all the ships that go to Puerto Rico to be American ships, which makes the goods extremely expensive. Tax credits that are given to companies. I mean, a lot of the money that should go to Puerto Ricans are just going through other organizations and other institutions, not the people that are hungry on the island. So I did that for a very long time until I got exhausted. I think I did the podcast until I just physically couldn't do it anymore because I was absorbing all these stories. I mean, you know that because you are absorbing all these stories, and sometimes they give you energy, right? So it's like, oh my god, I'm so glad I interviewed this person, and you're just so energetic. And sometimes you're like, oh my god, I can't believe this is happening to my island, and I had to take a step back.
I think the hardest part is seeing how humans treat other humans. I mean, that bottom line is, from our perspective of storytelling, is knowing how beautiful, how lovely humans are, and how there are those of us who don't have a voice, who depend on storytellers to be heard. It's that Horton hears a who. Horton can hear it. He's the only one that can hear the who's saying, we're in trouble here. Somebody help us.
Yeah.
And it's interesting to me as well to think of, obviously, you being drawn to your homestead and talking about that, but also the parallels of Haiti, and also the parallels of, we see how the media, how the politicians use these places as either photo ops or to denigrate or to other. It's diabolical, in my opinion. Haiti being, of course, a prime example right now of this vilification of a people. It's heart-wrenching. I mean, I can't think of a better word for that.
A medical anthropologist. His name is Paul Farmer. He passed away. He used to work in Haiti, and he wrote a really beautiful book called The Uses of Haiti, which could be applied to a lot of the nations like Haiti and Puerto Rico that serve an economic purpose for others, and especially for the United States. And his thesis is that Haiti was treated to remain poor because it served as a cautionary tale of what you do when you revolt against your empire. Haiti was the first Black republic. That is an interesting thesis because...
Sorry, I just want to be clear. So what you're saying is, he was saying we need Haitians to be poor and the country of Haiti to be poor because it serves the narrative of other.
His thesis was basically trying to explain that this is what the world has done to Haiti. He worked in Haiti for many years. He loved the country. But yes, he said, in essence, that we have to keep this place, poor and suffering to serve as a cautionary tale of what happens when you go against the big guys.
Yeah. And what does that do to an identity of a community? Well, what if I'm a Haitian, not only am I hearing this rhetoric from the outside, but I also have got years and years and years of this trauma telling me who I am. How do I not listen to that and rise above it, so to speak?
Absolutely. I mean, I can't even imagine, but actually now I can sort of see what kind of trauma they went through after the earthquake, because when Puerto Rico had its hurricane and then a swarm of earthquakes a year or two later, we underwent not the same, never the same, but similar to extent experience. And I remember when I was in Haiti and I spoke with a dancer, and I asked him, there's a lot of people getting visas to escape, Haiti, especially if they're artists and there are other dance companies welcoming them. And he was like, I'm not leaving Haiti. I'm not leaving my country. And to me, that was such a beautiful lesson, because in spite of the fact that he could have escaped that narrative by being one on the outside, right? But he was like, I don't care about that narrative. I need to be here for my country. But the pain that I heard in some of these dancers and musicians' voices. Oh, Susan, I wish you would have seen it. I mean, when I went to this event over there, I mean, like, that same pain became such glorious joy. Story within a story. This is Haiti, 2010, 3 months after the earthquake, and we traveled to this little town called Aken. And they have this beautiful performance. It was called Hymn à la Vie, or the Hymn to Life. And all of a sudden, all these dancers, I'm getting goosebumps. They all go on stage and they start performing this beautiful dance. And they're trying to become like a vessel between the spiritual and the earthly world. And you can see their bodies moving, just trying to create. I mean, when you see a body trying to force communication because the need is so big, but the body is a vessel and the joy is real, it's something that I would never be able to explain into words. You have to see it. And that's what I saw in Haiti. I mean, like an ability to communicate between worlds that is so hard to find when you're not in that place.
Yeah, the transmogrification of pain into joy.
Beautiful.
Yeah. A friend of mine went to Haiti to help clean up and said that the thing that struck him so deeply was that in the midst of all this absolute horror and devastation, he said that he noticed that the Haitian people, especially the little kids, but the Haitian people, they seemed to not lose their joy and their faith, that they were able to see beyond the pain and turn it into something.
The schools, the makeshift schools that I visited, because I went to a couple of tent cities, the makeshift schools were just like nothing happened here. I mean, like the kids didn't have a way to understand the earthquake because they have never experienced one. And yes, they were traumatized, but the way that they carried on playing soccer, making music, just being kids, but even also the adults. I mean, I was there, I didn't go like maybe 10 days after the earthquake. And the 10 cities had like kitchen and like, I mean, it's an entire infrastructure. They immediately sort of took charge. There's a book by Rebecca Solnit. It's called, I forget the name of it, but it is about different tragedies across different places. They mentioned LA, the earthquake. They mentioned several other tragedies. And it is the same pattern. Immediately after an event like this, a tragedy, sometimes climate or unexpected, two things happen. First, it's portrayed as the worst thing in the world, but what the world is not seeing is the community that is being created and how immediately we bands together to help one another. And that is rarely seen. People see the destitute, the poverty, but people don't see the organization, the community, how the self-governance that happens in these spaces. It's something, and it's rarely seen. I'm not sure why it hasn't, studied more or made into a movie. But yeah, I believe that every time that we want to write or create art, we should try as best as we can to come with the curiosity of a child, because we start seeing something else. We start seeing the real story. We start seeing from a whole different perspective. And I've always been fascinated by kids who make art. I just love like kids. You get a kid a camera. Have you seen the documentary in India, I believe, and they give kids cameras, and I believe they're in like in a neighborhood where there was challenging, and the photography that these kids produce. I mean, it was so fantastic. That their perspective to look for joy within the uncertain circumstances is something that that is it's a gift, and we should sort of tap into that, I guess, when we try as artists.
Yeah, one of my favorite things ever is when people who are textile artists get the pictures that little kids draw of monsters and then turn them into stuffed animals.
I love
I
that.
love that so much. It's like my favorite thing ever. Let's talk about your books.
So Demonios was published in 2023, I believe. Yeah. And it's my first fiction book. It's in Spanish. I'm working on a translation right now. And it's about this kid in the middle of the countryside in Puerto Rico trying to understand his sexuality while his parents are becoming part of this cult and this religious sect. And, of course, there's an influence from my upbringing. But this is a great exercise as a writer. I chose this, and I know how difficult it was. When you try to use your life as inspiration, it's difficult to write the narrative. You have to sort of divorce yourself from the story and create new characters. So what came out is a completely different story of what happened. It was something on a different level. I was able to use the character as a 13-year-old to remember through his pain with a lot of magic realism because he's remembering these things, right? So he's remembering his family embracing this new religion. He's remembering the conversion therapy type rituals that he's undergoing to deal with his sexuality. He's remembering the adapting to a new school that is also religious, but his memories to cope are sort of comical. So throughout the book, the narrator was a kid, is laughing through it, and it's what they call in Puerto Rico and Latin America "reír para no llorar," like to laugh to avoid crying. But it's a lot more poetic in Spanish. But basically, what happens is that again, I was so happy with that book just because I did exactly what I wanted. I was a solid narrative in the terms that it had a traditional arc, but I gave myself license for a lot of things. Like a lot of moments become songs. They become there's a fight between Michael Jackson and the mother. So at the end of some chapters, there's like a score, like the scores in the A's when you have like video games, like the mom has like 1,000 points and Michael Jackson has 700. And there's some drawing that I was able to incorporate. So I was able to write the book that I really wanted. It's easy to read, but at the same time, there's some artistic license to do things that I wanted to do when I wrote a book.
Demon, that means demon. The demons?
No. Basically, the kid Ejeri, he thinks that he's possessed by a demon of homosexuality. So it's his journey to try to exorcise this demon for him through, again, painful, very comical circumstances at times.
Did you go to conversion therapy?
Not per se, but there was a lot of the belief that it was wrong to be gay. So there were during these services they would pray, and I have a funny anecdote, which is that I think I was a little effeminate, but I maybe don't know. I don't maybe not enough, I guess. This pastor was praying over people, and he was adamant that was gonna get demons out of us. So when the pastor came to me, I pretended that I was exercising. I was like started screaming and then he left me alone. And then he went to this other guy who was not gay and said like demon of homosexuality, and I'm like, oh no, that was that was here.
That's my demon.
Wait, that's my demon. How dare you? I mean, like looking back, I'm like, oh, like I was like, oh no, he got the wrong guy. Like I'm still on the floor pretending that I'm like, just being exercised, and he's trying to get the demon out of this other guy. And I'm like, okay, well maybe just. So, but yeah, no, I mean, like again, that
He's
was
like
weird,
the demon one time in college.
It was an experiment. He had one drink, and then the demon had like got a hold of him. For me, literature has become a way to heal. It really has. I mean, after I wrote Demonios, Susan, I promise you that I saw my hometown with different eyes because I had to make peace with that town that I felt like really treated me like shit. I mean, like between the religious crap to the really bad, queer bashing that I experienced, and then when I wrote this book, I honestly have to say that I looked at it differently, and I used to joke about people that talked about literature and that sort of spirituality when I'm like, I'm sold, it works.
But I'm glad that you took that experience and again transmogrified it into something beautiful and powerful. That's all. I mean, that's what we do. That's a creative's job, is to take the bleak and the horrific and the sad and turn it into something so beautiful that it almost forces people to feel when they try to numb out from things.
Yeah. Exactly. I couldn't agree more. I mean, that is my favorite thing that happened in April when I went to the International Congress that I was invited to. It was the first International Congress that I was ever invited to as a writer, and I was like thrilled because it paid. Like I'd never been in a place where they paid me to be there. I mean, like, and hotel and everything, and and of course I wrote my essay, and then when I walked into the auditorium, so then there were like at least like 300, like 400 kids from different schools, and some of them came after me afterwards, and they were like, "I read your book," and I'm like, "You what? How? First of all, this is not for children, but but why are you?" And they were like, and all these queer kids and not queer kids, and everybody was just, and I was like, "Oh my God!" It was so moving to know that my writing had given something to a kid, because high school was the worst time of our
Ah,
lives probably.
the
So when I know
worst.
that somebody was reading this in high school, just as a way of coping, I mean, I was so moved. So yeah, that's what I want my art to do. I want people to be like, oh shit, like this is awesome, and this is making me feel so good, and I can feel like I can survive through this, and that's what music and art and writing should do. So yeah.
Listen, books keep kids alive. They keep them alive. They give
Yeah.
them a lifeline, and adults too, but most specifically, I think, like, so many people have told me that libraries were their lifeline, and
Yeah.
having books that spoke to who they were, not who they were expected to be, but who they actually were. And
Yeah.
that sometimes just that sort of thing keeps you literally on the planet.
Absolutely, absolutely. And to
Yeah.
know that can contribute to that, I mean, it makes me, again, I was something that I've been trying to do for the last like 3 or 4 years, is to be genuine. So every time that I undertake a task, like whether it's a book or a song or whatever, I just sort of sit down. I'm like, what do I really want to do? Like, is this going to fulfill what I really want to do? And when I have that in mind, then I feel like the end result has been that somebody has saw it, and somebody has felt like he was healing, that he was. And I think that's, I'm pretty sure that that's part of, the objective that I have there, is just to make sure that somebody else is also healing with this with me at the same time.
Amen to that. You're awesome.
Mm.
Thank
So
you.
are you. I've been listening to your music. Oh my God, I love it.
Thank you.
You the greatest hits. It's my favorite so far. I mean, that
Uh,
one, I just really love it. I mean, I was like, oh, why don't we make music like this anymore?
Thank you. Tell people how they can find you and your writings.
So huáscarrobles.com, and it's my name, HUASCARROBLES.com. I'm in Amazon. My Demonios is in Amazon right now. And I am working on a second book of stories, which is called The Penultimate Days. This is a hybrid novel and short story. And again, a lot of stories within the stories. And basically, this one is about sort of like the future of Puerto Rico and the Caribbean and the diaspora. If the economic policies in place right now allow Puerto Rico to become this tax haven, so it sort of posits on a near future in which all this really weird, funky stuff happened with, like, crypto billionaires and, like, queer youth rebelling, and it was just a lot of fun to write. And I'm hoping that I'm going to in a couple of weeks, I'm going to a book fair in New York. I was just invited, so I'm hoping that I meet an editor who is in love with his book, and a translator too.
Did you write this one in Spanish?
I wrote it in Spanish, but I already began translating it because I knew that I'm getting some solid work in English, and so the penultimate days is in almost in both languages. I'm almost done with them. Yeah.
Is that a play on the last days, to the second to last
It's a
days? I think
second.
that's so funny.
It's
Yeah.
because in Puerto Rico the joke is that, like, well, maybe they're not the last days because the trauma continues. These are the penultimate days, and that's like an ongoing joke throughout the book. Like, well, these are penultimate days.
That's so funny.
So yeah, you got it. It's so funny. Nobody's ever gotten it.
Hilarious. Well, I think you're delightful. I'm so glad we met. I'm excited that this is the beginning of a beautiful friendship. And yeah, I really appreciate you.
Oh, Susan, I've been looking forward to talking to you forever. Thank you for this wonderful interview. And yeah, I mean, like, the journey for us has just begun. We're gonna have a lot of stories within the stories. I promise you that.
Yeah, it's coming. And thank you for listening, everybody. Bye.
Bye, love. Bye.
Yeah. Rate, review, and subscribe to Hey Human Podcast on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks. Bye.